Hey there. Have you ever struggled with chronic illness or chronic tension and pain? Have you ever wondered how the trajectory of your life might change if you committed to addressing your dis-ease? Hey, everybody, I'm Amy Takaya, founder and friend at Free Your Soma, where you can learn to release muscle tension and pain that keeps you from your full, happy, authentic self. Today, I'm speaking with Christina Kantzavelos, who is a psychotherapist specializing in working with clients facing chronic illness. Today, we are going to explore some fun, edgy topics such as timeline hopping, interdimensional reality, body morphine, and epigenetics as it relates to chronic illness and pain. So stay tuned. Every day there is a forgetting, and every moment there is the possibility of remembering. Remembering who you truly are, awakening to your body, to the inner world, to the experience of being alive. Here is where you find the beauty, the joy, and here is where you free your soma. I'm your host, Amy Takaya. I'm here to help you move from pain to power, from tension to expansion, and ultimately from fear to love.
Hi,
Hey, Christina, how's it going today?
I am so excited to be here for a second time and to talk about all the things we're going to talk about because I think they're completely pertinent to the times right now.
Oh, absolutely. And we had not met in person, and then we got to meet in person just like in May. Like I'd had you on the podcast before last year. We'd been messaging and communicating over the Instagram, and then we got to meet each other in person, which was so special at Joshua Tree Music Festival. And you got to experience Hannah Somatics with me, which was really special too.
It was magical. I like recommend 10 out of 10. That was fantastic. And it was also funny because like even when I hugged you, it felt like I'd already known you. I'd met you before. It's just like, oh yeah, this is comfortable. This is right. I know this feeling.
Totally. And it's, some of that's maybe even related to what we're talking about today, where when you meet people who are on the same wavelength as you, like we say stuff like that, oh, their vibe, like and my vibe just matched. But like, what are we actually talking about? Like, what does that actually mean on like a embodied level, right, in our body? And what does it mean to be like out of sync with people? So we're gonna like kind of explore that today too, because it has to do with what we're talking about, right? And more than that, I'd love to just start with a question. And I'm going to answer this question too. And maybe if you're listening right now and I ask this question, maybe you get an intuitive hit for yourself too of like what your answer to this question might be. So the question is, when did you first feel like you'd changed timelines in your life?
Hmm. Yeah, that is such a challenging one to think about. It's an incredible question. And I want to say at various points in my life, however, the one that was most noticeable more than any other would be while I was sick and deciding that I was not going to identify as being sick anymore.
Mm,
And noticing like almost overnight, not quite, but almost overnight, how much I shifted, how much I changed, and ultimately dimension hopped into this dimension where I don't identify as that at all. I am thriving. I feel good in my body. I feel good in my mind. I feel good in my soul. And I feel more like my authentic self. Like every time I dimension hop, I feel like I'm getting closer and closer to who I am at the core and living
mm.
my authentic truth.
Amazing. Yes. And I mean, in our previous episode, which I think was called like, how do we get sick and how do we heal, addressing chronic illness. And if you haven't heard that episode, go back and listen to it. We get really deep into Christina's process and her story and all of the things that she learned through this really intense era of your life, right? And all the ways that like you still in that progress of like healing and thriving and being well, right, from where you came from. And like, kind of what you just said about how there were multiple points in your life where you feel this happened, but then this one stands out to you the most because it was like this awareness that came through really strong and this decision that you made to disidentify or to not be so immersed in that identity of like, I'm sick and it means this, this, and this about me,
Mm,
right? And how
mm,
just
mm.
changing that identification started you
Yeah.
on a whole new trajectory.
It's this concept of be, do, have, right? I am, I'm choosing what I'm identifying with, and my body, my mind, my soul are naturally going to follow suit. And then I am ultimately going to have it. So that's, anyway, we're going to talk more about that, but that was the process. And just being mindful of how I was speaking to my body, and what, our bodies hear everything we say. And so if I'm just constantly feeding it negative words and affirmations and information, I mean, like, to that point, that definitely had not helped me. I always say, when people say like, well, okay, I'm going to start saying I'm healthy, I'm this, I'm that, but it's not true. And I'm like, well, how has the opposite been serving you up until this point? Probably not great.
Right.
So just switching it, because ultimately, this is also this is scientific, in the sense of, when we are doing visualizations or practicing gratitude, we're releasing dopamine and serotonin, which is wiping that cortisol out. And the lower our cortisol is, the more we are likely to feel better in our body, the less our immune system is going to be impacted, and our autonomic nervous system. So there is science to this. It's not just woo-woo. It's real. So anyway, I'm curious about you though.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I love that. I think that, the woo, it only seems woo-woo because we haven't done the right study yet to talk about what's
Amen.
happening.
Amen. Completely.
Yeah.
Completely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because my experience, when I answered this question for myself, like it was something, and this has been true for me throughout my life, where like it's sort of a bottom up experience where like my body sort of started shifting because
Mhm,
of
mhm,
changing certain things. And I felt this really big shift out of, and this wasn't conscious at the time because I was young, but when I look back on it, it's like that's the first time I really experienced a shifting timelines into one where I am, my more closer, like you said, to my authentic true self. So like my backstory around this is that around 8 years old, I went through early onset puberty, which was very traumatic. And
mhm,
that, was due in part to stress that was going on in my young life and in my body, where my cortisol was like through the roof. All my stress hormones were through the roof. And it's kind of like I recently talked to someone, it's like a plant that shoots, too early because of stress. It starts like, producing all the little babies. It goes through its like reproductive process because it's stressed and it's like thinking, oh, I'm going to die. So I might as well like quickly reproduce, so that I live on. So like my
mhm,
body did that when I was about 8 years old, that I went through puberty. And then the resulting like next 3 years, I just got more and more sick and more like heavy and depressed in my body. I was struggling with hypothyroidism. And then at 11 years old, my mother finally got a doctor who would run, and we talk about this in your episode too, about finding the right doctor who's going to take you seriously, because at that point it was like, people were just like, oh, she's a little fat kid. She just needs to exercise more. And it's like,
mhm,
no, there's something hormonally going on here. There's something going on in my nervous system, right? So my mother found a doctor, and I got told that I had food sensitivities to dairy and soy. And so I stopped eating dairy and soy. And that basically meant in 1999, I stopped eating processed foods. And that sent my young little body into a completely different timeline.
mhm,
Because what had been going on with the early onset puberty was in part to, and now I understand this, I didn't know this at the time, just like the chemical load, that was stressing my body, from the foods that I was eating, in addition to the, mental, emotional, traumatic experiences, all that was just like kind of compounded by the fact that I wasn't really getting the healing foods in my body that I needed. And instead I was taking on a chemical load and like, right. So I switched timelines when my body and my face literally started morphing. Like there's pictures of me when I'm like 11 and I look so different than I did when I was like 4. It's like my face when I'm 4 is like kind of similar to how it is now. You like look at a picture of me, be like, oh, little Amy, right? And then you look at a picture of me when I'm 11 and like I look so different because my body was literally morphing into hypothyroidism. I'm sick. I'm
Mm,
overweight as an 11, as a 9-year-old, I'm like technically obese, right? And I think I may have had like a mild form of something called Cushing's, which is
mm.
based on cortisol levels, right?
It's cortisol, yep.
Yeah. And so my face started morphing within 3 months of changing the way that I was eating. And
Wow.
throughout my teen years, I pretty much was like dipping in and out of these timelines because I didn't have, the enough self-awareness to realize like fully what was happening. But like I would, you know, be eating, foods I'm not allergic to was kind of how I put it at the time. I'd be eating well and like taking care of myself. And then I'd be like, "Ugh, I just want to be normal and eat pizza." And then I'd do that for
Yeah.
a while. And my whole like timeline would morph. I would morph into the heaviness around my face, depressive thoughts and feelings would start coming back. And I look back on it now and it was like I just like was bopping back and forth between those timelines for a long time and not even realizing it.
Yeah, yeah, but looking back, you can see that so clearly on your timeline. I mean, whatever time, it's not linear, but it's this bounce depending on what you're doing, how you're operating in your body, in the world, in your realm. So 100%. And now that you say that too, like when I found out I was celiac, that was in 2012, you see a complete shift in my face everywhere. It looked like I had lost a good 50 pounds. That's not an exaggeration because simply I was not eating processed foods anymore. It was a lot, especially back then, it was pretty difficult to find like gluten-free products on the market. It was very limited, meaning you were cooking and baking everything at home, which is what we're supposed to be doing most of the time. Anyway, ideally, right? You know the ingredients that are going into each meal, what the oil you're using and the salt and the seasoning and is it organic? I mean, these were things that had to shift and change for me to realize this. And I do say sometimes it takes us getting sick to get healthy and to dimension hop. And I saw this post where it's like it was talking about chronic illness and how that in and of itself is its own psychedelic trip because of how much it brings you to the present. You have no choice but to be so present in your mind and your body when you're not feeling well. When you feel pain in your body, I mean, does anything else bring you to the present more than pain? To be like, hey, listen, I'm yelling. And you posted about this, I think yesterday or the day before, about how like your body starts to scream at you. I mean, before that, it'll whisper. It'll start with a whisper until it ends up with the scream. And I think getting this journey of getting sick, of being in pain, that is how we learn to really start communicating with the soma, with the body, and listening to it and honoring it, and not pressing the override button, which I know I pressed for so long in my life. Like, what do you know? No, I'm going to keep working. I'm not going to rest. I'm going to go do this thing and that thing. And I'm going to keep saying yes to all these things I don't actually want to say yes to, but feel the need to, because if I don't, maybe I won't be loved. I won't
Right.
be a part of the group, of the tribe, of the pack. So, all of these things come from our childhood and our upbringing and how we survived. And the question is, are they allowing you to thrive at this point?
Did you know that your muscles are holding on to thoughts, memories, and feelings? If you have a tight neck or back, you're not just getting old, you're experiencing a buildup of tension from the life you've lived. Most people don't know this, but there is a part of your brain that can reverse and prevent chronic tension. When you relax your muscles, you not only move better and regulate your nervous system, but you also free yourself from the grip the past has over your body, so you can live with freedom, confidence, and enjoy your life now. How does that sound? Join me, Amy Takaya, and discover what my clients are raving about at youcanfreeyoursoma.com.
Right. Well, and the adaptive patterns, which is another way
Yep.
I love using other words other than trauma to talk about stuff like this. And
Yep. Yep.
because it's such a loaded word and there's so many
Sure.
things, there's so many blessings that come from our traumatic experiences once we fully
100%.
metabolize them and process them, right? Which I think you're, kind of spoke to now, like that can be what sets us on the path to actually healing things that otherwise, without that like strong catalyst, without that scream, like we might have not even have known that they were going on. Right.
100%, 100%. And yeah, I'm so grateful. It's that post-traumatic growth. I'm so grateful for even the worst things that have happened to me in my life because they happened for me. I wouldn't be having this conversation with you. I wouldn't be in the work I'm doing. Likely you wouldn't be doing this work had I not moved through the fire in all of those instances. Do I wish it upon anyone? Of course not. Never. I'm just saying though, like I don't regret them happening to me because they happened for me.
Right.
And those adaptive patterns that that are created often from a young age or in the earlier periods of our lives. I mean, there's a way to transmute them in a way that honors us now and who we are and our highest selves in this world.
Absolutely. For me, it was showing up a lot of times my adaptive patterns showed up in my body and not, and this has been a common theme for me that like, I mean, post somatics and somatic work that I've done, the body work and everything I've received, which I now practice, right, has really changed my ability to like have a lower lag time between like what my body's saying and what I'm consciously understanding. Like that lag time is so much shorter. But when I was younger, it would take a while. Like my body would have to get to that screaming point. For me, my adaptive patterns were showing up in my musculature in my body as hypermobile joints. And there's like interesting literature out there that actually shows that people who have issues with understanding like, boundaries as like a concept, like
Yes.
in this relational boundaries also have struggles with boundaries in their own body, have a tendency towards hypermobile joints and things like this.
Hyperflexibility. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Totally. And it's so funny you say that as I've been doing this work, because I had, what EDS and hypermobility and mixed connective tissue disorder, all in which play a part in that. And I even had shoulder surgery because my shoulder kept popping out of its joint. That's not normal. And I would have subluxed ribs all the time where I'd have to go to a professional to get them placed back in. And as I began really doing strong boundary work through Codependence Anonymous and working with various therapists and various coaches who specialize in this, I stopped having subluxed ribs. I have not had pain. Like it's incredible how much inner work plays a part on the physical level, like inner
Totally.
emotion. Yeah.
And, I have to say, because I worked with your body, right, at Joshua Tree Music Festival, like when I was moving you around, I didn't sense those kinds of patterns going on. That same kind of, you told me that you had a history of like EDS, but I have clients who are like in the throes of it. And I could tell that like, even if there was that like old patterning in your body, it was not like right at the forefront. It was not going on actively as I'm moving you around. And I have to say that you had so much body awareness. I work with all different types of people. Some people who are very dissociated, they're at a different point on their healing journey and they haven't done the kind of work that you're describing that you have already gone through, right? And so they might lack, I might ask like, how does your leg feel? And they can't answer that question because the reality that they're like tuned into at that moment doesn't include like feeling into their legs fully. Those pathways aren't turned on for them, but you had so much awareness. And some of that comes from the things you're describing, from having lived in these other timelines where you actually had to face these kinds of challenges on a daily basis.
And what I want to share is, first of all, it makes me so happy. Thank you for sharing that about my body. I mean, it just makes me really, really joyous. But it is when you're moving through challenges on any kind of level, it can be really scary to be inside your body, like really, really scary, especially when we've been sick and we feel like our body is trying to kill us or harm us or do something awful to us. Then we hear this word autoimmune, like my body is attacking me, which I don't, I'm just going to say my strong statement, which is I don't believe that our body would ever want to harm us. Our body wants to thrive as much as we do. It'll do everything in its power to get to a level of homeostasis. It's a matter of us working alongside it. What it's attacking is something else. It's always something else. And that's why you need to work with the right practitioner to figure out what that is. And so often in my practice, that could be anything from, that could be from trauma, that could be from something like Lyme disease or another co-infection or parasites or mold
Right.
or metals. Like there is,
Yeah.
yeah,
A
yeah.
lack of
It's
boundaries in your
a
digestive
lack.
tract. The leaky
There
gut
we
is
go.
literally a lack of
Leaky
boundaries.
gut.
That
100%.
that mucus lining has been
Yep.
damaged. And so
Yep.
things are getting out that shouldn't be there. And so your body's not, like you said, it's not attacking you, it's attacking something that has, violated the space that it's not supposed to be in. It's interesting. I worked with a client recently who has autoimmune issues and chronic pain and hypermobility and all the things that we were just talking about. And I had this like very, when I'm working with people, I have these really strong intuitive hits come in that like maybe seem woo-woo because I haven't like, gotten them from like pulling research. But if I went and pulled research, I could probably explain like what's coming through. Do you know what I'm saying? Like
Of course.
these
Yeah.
intuitive hits. And I had this idea, maybe you can tell me what you think of it. With autoimmune, your body's reflecting that there has been like a continued invasion of your space. And
Mm.
it's been going on for a while. And so now your body is like reflecting that to you, that it's because of some violating kind of, these are kind of heavy words to use for it, but something intrusive that's been, that lack of boundaries in your gut, something that's been kind of like coming in that maybe you've been allowing to come into your field that doesn't belong there. Maybe you've had like a really negative relationship, which this woman had. She had a very like, some of the things she was recovering from was like a violent encounter with like a partner who had been very narcissistic and abusive and all that stuff, right? And that, that kind of like continued violation, like that would be such an interesting question to kind of examine, like when it comes to autoimmune issues, like what is the correlation between those and people who are struggling with these like boundary issues and relational issues?
Well, we look at Dr. Gabor Mate's work, and he does speak to this quite often. The folks who get, autoimmune disease or who get sick often have issues with authenticity and boundaries and saying no. And then the body is reflecting that piece. And then it starts to say no for us, which is what we spoke about in the last podcast episode. So I don't know. It's a sign from the body of like, hey, I'm not liking this. This isn't safe for me. This doesn't feel good for me. Can we change something? And nothing changes if nothing changes. So let's get on this healing journey. Let's now shift timelines to this place where you're in healthier relationships,
Yes.
nourishing relationships where you feel safe to be 100% your authentic self, which everyone listening right now deserves to be in those relationships, in those dynamics with their community, with their loved ones, with everything around them. Everyone deserves that. That is a right.
Absolutely.
That is a human right. That is a soul right.
Absolutely. And it's totally possible for everyone too.
Yes.
It is totally possible for everyone. It's about kind of checking inside your own body, inside your own psyche, and really doing that like deeper excavated work. And obviously doing that with a skilled practitioner, accelerates the process, accelerates that connection and that ability, right? But doing that, checking in and finding where are the boundaries of my own body, solidifying, fortifying that, where are the boundaries of my energy, like saying no when there's like an option, right, to do something or not do something, and you have been saying yes, saying yes, saying yes, you're committing to this timeline that maybe isn't really what your body needs, maybe is part of those dynamics of chronic illness and chronic pain that you're facing. Right. And just saying no puts you on a totally different trajectory, on a totally different timeline. Can you speak to that?
Yes, yes. And saying no, just remember, saying no allows space for things you want to say yes to.
I love
And
that.
it's giving permission to others to do the same. And I want to say a couple of things actually. Like when I worked with you, and I know you said such wonderful things about me, thank you. But what I noticed was that I really felt like I was 100% in my body by the end of it. Like I think I got pretty emotional during it. And even after, it was just such beautiful work. I wish I was like, can you move in with me? Can you move in with me? I want this every day, please. It just felt so amazing to me in my body. And what I want to share is that after we worked together, I then became hyper aware of what was taking me out of alignment, literally and figuratively. And I was able to go, wait, this doesn't feel right. So I'm going to shift, even if it was like, I don't want to go in this direction. I want to go in that direction. I don't want to eat this food. I want to eat that food. This conversation is not feeling great. I'm feeling a little bit dysregulated. I'm gonna move and shift out of this conversation. Like just being in alignment and having that co-regulation with you really allowed for me to have this space of knowingness. And that's why it's so important to work with a practitioner who is trauma and somatic, both trauma and somatic informed, because there's this level of co-regulation. Like when I work with clients, I hope that's my goal, just like for you, right? Is that we're creating this safe and courageous space to explore all parts of ourselves and integrate all parts of ourselves and be in our body, feel safe to be in our body together. And, I work with some people who've never had this kind of relationship with someone. And so they leave our session and they're like, wait, that doesn't feel good. Like, I don't like the way they're speaking to me or the way they're treating me. I don't have to be in this dynamic anymore. I can say no to this and I can say yes to what feels good to me. So that's that piece of it, of co-regulation and feeling safe enough to explore what the body and the mind feel like outside of this. And again, when we say yes to what lights us up inside, I always ask my clients, does it feel like an F yes in your body? Does it? Or does it further regulate you? Does it dysregulate you? Does it upregulate you? We talk about these terms, right? And moving, like following our joy and moving with that. Because every time I say yes to what fuels me, what excites me, I'm never really left astray. It's the times where I'm like, I don't know, I'm on the fence, I'm unsure. I know they're going through a hard time, so I should say, it's when I start shitting on myself, so to speak. And that, right? Stop shitting on yourselves. But it's when I start doing that where I'm like, I notice that I'm not in alignment. I am not speaking my truth. I'm not following my truth. And the outcome is less desirable for me. So that's the two different dimensions that happen, the less desirable and the one that is. And every time you say yes to something that is in alignment and no to something that's not, you're giving others permission all around you to do the same, same.
Absolutely. First of all, I just want to thank you. I love that reflection. I know how, powerful our session was for you because you were so appreciative and I could see it in your energy field. And I just watched you really like relax and open in these spaces that maybe you didn't even know could open like that. Right. That there was kind of these wow moments that you were having. I mean, when I remember when I was like pressing your spine and reminding your spine that it could be bouncy, when I was doing that sequence with you, you're like, it's like you're pressing an on switch. Like this feels so good. It's like waking me up. And then, what you're describing, like after the fact of just being more in tune with yourself and able to more streamlined listen to your inner voice, that's your inner guidance system. That is a big, big theme with my clients. It's a big theme of the work that I do, is that it allows you to get in touch with your innate somatic intelligence that's actually there guiding you all the time, moment to moment. And speaking to what you were describing about like, checking in with yourself, is it an F yes? Or am I not sure? One thing that always comforts me is like, these things shift and change from moment to moment. And if it's a no right now, that's okay. Because if I check in with myself later and it's a yes, I can change my mind. Maybe not about everything in the world. There might be some circumstances where this is not the case, but you can, like if it says about like going to somebody's baby shower or whatever, and you're like really not feeling it, for like 3 days, you're just like, I need to like not go. I need to like say no to this. Maybe it's because you need to get better resourced in your body. Maybe as you take care of yourself and you get better sleep, and then the day before arrives and you're like, you know what? I'm checking in with myself right now. And it's a yes. I do want to go there. I do want to be there. Maybe some of those blocks that were in the way before were just my body letting me know that at this moment, we're not resourced enough for that output of energy. Right.
Yes, I completely agree. Sometimes we need to also just ride the emotional wave and see, like I say to my clients, like just sleep on it. Just sleep on it. See what shifts tomorrow if it's a maybe, and just check in. yeah, you know what? After sleeping, and sleeping in itself is being resourced, right? Getting enough rest, not making decisions when we're hungry or super tired or emotionally upset or angry, right? But giving yourself the space and the time to ride that wave, and at the end going, actually, it would be nice to see people at this baby shower. I've actually missed this person, and I think it would be good for me to get out of the house and be in community. Or, it's still just not feeling like it's in alignment, and I'm going to send a gift and I'm going to have one-on-one time with this person when I feel like it resonates.
Totally. Well, and sometimes it's that lag time too between like what we experience. And I talked about this with another woman on a previous podcast where she was really going into detail and describing how it can take her time to recognize like when something was violating or upsetting to her. Like in the moment, it's just kind of like, oh, whoa, like kind of go deer in headlights for a second. Don't totally know what happened or why I'm so uncomfortable or why this is like a no. Right. And then taking that time to, like you said, sleep on it or allow the emotional waves to ride out and then go, oh, I know why that really did not feel good. Right. And that like lag time is sort of like when we're figuring out that we've like entered some timeline or some patterning in ourselves. Another way to describe it, like a patterning that like isn't really in our authentic self. Right. And how can we like self-correct and get back to that place where we're on the right trajectory for our, destiny, so to speak, like our where we're really headed, where it feels like, oh yeah, I'm headed in this direction. I have another question for you, kind of in the theme of this.
Yeah.
So, have you ever had the experience of being in this moment with yourself where it's almost like you can sense or speak to a version of yourself that exists in the future, like maybe way in the future, like a grandmother crone version of yourself that exists who's like comforting you from that timeline? Have you ever had that experience?
This is the work I do in my sessions. This is the exact work. So, we do timeline hopping on one direction or another, like going into the past and being with our younger selves, because we forget we're like babushka dolls. We have so many layers, and we forget like our all of those inner children, teenagers, adults within us. They don't go away, they don't perish, they don't die. They're there within us. So we get to go back in time and be with them now, be the person they so wish they had then. The same goes for jumping into the future. So when I'm working with someone and they're struggling with something that's going on now, in like right now in the present, I will have them jump to them older, even whether it's 5 years, whether it's 20 years, 30 years, it doesn't matter. And I will have their older selves, their wiser selves come speak with them and talk to them about and impart wisdom and thoughts and feelings. And it's incredible because so often, like, this thing that seems like the biggest deal is like, oh, she told me or he told me it's going to pass. Everything's going to be okay, that I should choose what's making me happiest right now, or
Giving you that
what's bringing me the
perspective.
most. Yes. And it really, that shifts the timeline too, because it offers a different perspective and understanding and compassion, right? This really, which is so key. Self-compassion is so key. So yeah, for myself, I do use it, and it's an incredible tool. We can tap into it at any time, like being with our older selves, our wiser self. What would they say to us given all of this life experience between now and then?
Right.
What would they say to us?
Totally. And then just for fun, we can hop into the reverse idea here, which is like that our anxiety about, like, say, if you've ever gone through a period where like I've gone through this, and I'm not wishing this on anybody if you don't go through this, but where you're like paranoid about developing cancer or you're paranoid about developing an illness. And in a way, you can almost timeline hop to that already being the case. You can imagine yourself laying in the bed, unable to move. You can almost touch and sense like that feeling in your body. That experience is actually useful too, because it's showing you where you actually are not wanting to go. Through contrast, you can be like, oh no, that's not for me. You can get this really loud, clear message of like, no, from your higher self that says like, that is not where I want to go. And it can do the same thing in a way, like get us back on track. if we're able to be present with ourselves and not like get so caught up in that fear, timeline that we are unable to like hear the objections, right?
I completely agree. And I think, and I feel like people will resonate with that more than the other exercise, because we just do that so easily with ourselves. And all that is, it's our negativity bias in our brain. So the negativity bias in our brain is there to ultimately protect us, keep us safe, keep us small. It's often what that like negative voice in your head speaking down to you or saying mean things to you or projecting. That's what it's doing. It's just trying to keep you safe. It could care less about your joy and your happiness. It's going to show you the worst case scenarios or tell you, oh, hey, just wait for the other shoe to, things are going well, but wait for the other shoe to drop, like,
Yeah. It's so funny because you say
yeah,
that as you're saying that, I'm like imagining like it is the voice of like an authoritarian parent that maybe we once had that's going,
yes,
don't do that. Get off that wall. You're going to fall and break your arm.
yes,
Like and what's that mother
yes,
ultimately
it's
doing? She's
fear.
trying to protect our kid from
Yes.
breaking his arm.
Yeah,
But the
that's
truth
all
is
it
the kid's
is. That's
probably
all it
fine
is.
walking on the wall, but her fear of him breaking his arm is coming in to try to rescue him. And so then we
Yes.
get that voice going on in us, that voice of what if, what if, what if, because like you said, we're trying to protect ourselves.
Yeah, and it's just fear-based. And what I have clients do is I tell them to love on it, right? Because it can be a bully sometimes, like a straight bully, borderline abusive,
Abusive.
and
Mhm.
sometimes very, very abusive with, the things I've heard from clients and what the voice has to say. It's the voice of self-doubt and the voice of shame and so many other things. And, I always ask clients to love on it, tell it that, validate it. Like, I understand you're scared. I understand you're wanting to keep me safe. And guess what? We have a new program we're running.
Mm.
And here is going this. Now we're gonna start exercising our positivity bias in our brain and saying, okay, I see this visualization of me getting sick, and I am choosing to reach for this visualization of me thriving in life. And what does that look like? And what is that like? And especially for clients who are sick, right? And they're being told by doctors who they come to see me and they're being told by doctors, this is the rest of your life. Your life, this is only going to get worse and worse and worse. Like you need to start basically radically accepting things as they are. And I'm here to challenge that with them. Someone comes to see me and they're like, oh, I'm here to accept my illness. I'm like, then you're seeing the wrong therapist. I will not, we are here to create a new reality for yourself. And so it's really almost painful and so challenging for the clients I work with to imagine a different reality for themselves because they've only been told this is it, this is it, this is it. So who are you if you're not sick? Who are you if you're abundant? Who are you if you're in an amazing relationship? Like, who are you in all these circumstances that you don't feel are possible for you in this current reality?
Totally. Yes. And with the work that I do, like I see people go through that, I guess, like reckoning with themselves in the moment sometimes during sessions when, we have language around it. They're like, oh, my bad knees. Oh, this shoulder is just like my bad shoulder, and it doesn't do this. Or, oh, I have this pain here. It's like always there, and when we suddenly do some movements during the session and that pain just goes away, that pain that's always there just goes away and they can move their arm again, they have literally entered a new dimensional reality.
Yes.
And I think I pointed
Yes.
that out to you because we were playing with this concept. Like we were working with the right
Yes.
side of your body and everything got really calm and relaxed. And then you could feel what was unconsciously the holding pattern that was going on the left. And I'm like, here's a new dimensional reality you could be in. And
It was
here's the old
the total
pattern.
you could really sense it from like I was like I always think like dimension, we open up a door, right, and we walk through it, but it like felt like one half of my body was on one side of the door and the other half was on the other side of the door. So I really, once you worked on this side, it's like, ooh, I entered into this reality where I was 100% in my body, and I cried. It felt so good. It felt so good. And like I said, it put me into this mindset or this energy where I knew the difference between what was and what wasn't in alignment for the coming days, especially being at a festival. It was like so perfectly aligned that we worked together sort of at the beginning of the festival because I noticed as things came up, I really noticed the difference.
Yeah, no, and the things that come up that are sometimes in the way of, you know, going into that new reality, which you kind of touched on, like, what are the blockages? What are the beliefs? What are the, you know, things going on inside of me that reinforce that old timeline? You know,
Yeah.
like my ways that I operate in like my relationships, or the types of foods that I'm attracted to eating when I get stressed out, that are reinforcing this like old pattern, this old timeline. And this is where, you know, kind of playing with this idea of epigenetics, because this is another thing that I've like learned about some years ago and just was like, oh my God, that explains so much. Like my face, and you talked about this too, like literally morphs. Like the shapes of your face morph because your DNA is getting little switches turned on for certain characteristics and
Yep.
turned off for others based on your behaviors and what's happening in your life, right?
Yeah. Yes, yes, yes. And, you know, we think of epigenetics too, and how like trauma from the past can affect us. And they're finding that 14 lifetimes. Like, so if you had, imagine, or not lifetimes, but 14. So like your great, what is that? Your great, 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 great grandparent, if they experience trauma, that can show up in your body. However, we forget that strength also comes from 14 generations. It's not just trauma, it's also strength, and that we can shift and change patterning. We can shift and change the, you know, how our genetics show up in our current state. It
Totally.
is possible. It is
Yes.
possible. Witnessed it in myself. You've shared, and I've witnessed it in so many other people.
Yeah. And it's like, it's something that takes some effort, you know, and that's why in the intro to this episode, it's like commitment, you know, committing to this new timeline, committing to this new reality, because it's not
Yes.
going to be like you just turn a switch and you're there. There's going to be every moment in your life where you get to make tiny little micro choices that either are in the best alignment or not in the best alignment. And it's kind of this little dance of finding your way through, you know, in that, again, that like trajectory towards your destiny or towards who you're really meant to be, because there's all these little micro choices along the way and ways we kind of get tugged and pulled out of perfect alignment. But that's just actually how it works. It's like there's no such thing as just, you know, a straight arrow when it comes to like our life experience, because honestly, like that would just be boring.
It would be quite boring. Yeah, the non-linearity of this all is what makes life interesting. And what I want to say too is that, you know, when we were talking about like, oh, imagining ourselves having cancer, like so many of us have had these instances, not just related to health, but, you know, accidents happening or relationships, you know, ending or anything like that. Like that is the negativity bias, and these little micro changes that you are, you know, and actionable items that you're speaking to, like that is what strengthens that positivity bias. So you're up, you know, you're up against that negativity bias at all times, but as your positivity bias, as you build that muscle, just like anything else, you will notice that negativity bias gets quieter and
Yes.
quieter and quieter. Mine used to be so loud, especially when I was really, really sick, and for good reason. For good reason. It was just trying to protect me. But as I realized, like, hey, you know, I'm stuck in a rut now, and this is doing more harm than good for me, because I got to the point where I was unable to leave the house. I was so scared of anything outside of my home. And the irony is I had mold in my home. So like, just interesting, just so interesting. But those little, so as you make this decision of like, no, I want to switch things, you have this like epiphany, and you start to take those actionable steps and work towards a positivity bias in your brain, or, you know, work on strengthening it, you will notice huge shifts begin to happen. And back to one other thing you mentioned, where you're working with someone and they're like, oh, I have a bad shoulder, a bad this, or like, et cetera, et cetera. Like you know, those thoughts are going to pop up. I ask that you just challenge them every time. So
Right.
like, you know, I have this health journal, this healing journal, a mind, body, spirit journal. And one of the questions is, name one thing you love about your body, which is really hard for people when they're doing this. They always say that's one of the hardest questions in the entire journal. And what I ask is, if you're walking past the mirror and you say something negative to yourself, which so many people do, I'm just going to ask that you follow up with something nice about yourself. I'm not
Right.
liking the way my stomach looks, but I'm so happy that it's able to digest all of my food.
Yes. No, and then
And
that's such a big deal, like what you're describing, like getting out of our third person perspective on ourselves. So, that's a huge theme in the somatic work that I do, which is that we are disembodied. We're looking at ourselves from the outside, judging the way that we look, versus being inside of ourselves, inside of our bodies, and appreciating what we get to experience through our bodies. And that is a huge shift, because so much of our conditioning culturally is conditioning us to look outside of ourselves, at ourselves, and judge ourselves. Like when you ask that question, what do you love about your body? I think most people start to think like, what do I like about how my body looks? What part of my body do I like how it looks? That's the question they actually think you're asking, when really the question is much, much deeper. Someone could like about their body, I love that my body produced 3 healthy babies. I love that my body carried I love that my arms can hug and hold the ones that I love. I love that my legs can take me on hikes into beautiful places. I love that my stomach is sensitive, and when someone touches my stomach, it tickles. Like there's other things we could love about our embodied experience other than just how does this look from the third party outside.
Exactly. And I also say, like, specific to chronic pain and chronic illness, like when you have an area that's showing up, that's alerting you more than the others, to show it even more love. Like if I have shoulder pain, well, I love you for caring as much as you have, and I'm going to be mindful of you caring less in the future, of using other body parts, just really like challenging it with love, rather than so often like, oh, my shoulder, banishing it. It's awful. I hate it. Becoming disembodied and growing kind of, or getting further away from it, rather than getting as close as possible and being with it, and being with the pain, and being with the discomfort, and saying that
Being
it's
with
safe.
it.
Being
And
with it.
being with it. And I want to say too, like, this is a really great, like, kind of the work that I'm doing, and you experience this, is very non-invasive in the sense that it's very gentle and it's very attentive to pain and discomfort. And some practices aren't like that. Some practices are like, let's find that pain point and let's dig in. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying that's a different way than doing things than how I was trained, and the approach that ultimately worked the best for me. Like, I don't really enjoy like deep tissue massage anymore because it feels really invasive. I need a very gentle, stroking, tender kind of touch that is, aware of the pain points, and instead of pushing harder into them, is being softer with them so that they can feel that sense of, oh, I'm heard. I'm heard, and I don't have to scream. Someone's doing something about this and attending to this, and I can be calm and relaxed. And so, the approach that I take in my online sessions when people are having pain that shows up, we get to be with that pain and do a more gentle version of that same activity. Oh, you're noticing that your shoulder hurts when you lift it. Like, well, maybe lift it less. Maybe let's give your shoulder a break and let's work with your left leg and help your left leg relax. And then your shoulder's listening that whole time. Your shoulder's going, oh, it's okay to relax. Look, my left leg is relaxing. And then we come back to your shoulder. It's easier to work with because it's gotten that love, that tenderness that you're talking about, rather than what we're often, kind of doing with ourselves is like beating ourselves up or trying to force ourselves to be different rather than being with ourselves. And it takes practice. That's why you get a practitioner. That's why you work with a therapist, is, someone obviously who's got that somatic trauma informed perspective as you do, is that, someone like you and me is going to help you be with what's happening and not poke at it, not cause more disruption or invasion or, that pattern of overextending your boundaries, right?
Yes. I could not agree more with that. Yeah. Beautifully said.
Thank you. Yeah, it's such an interesting thing, this idea of hopping timelines. Do you did a little presentation at Joshua Tree Music Festival where you kind of took people through this concept a little bit more. Would you be open to kind of taking us through like an experience of that for the people listening right now?
Sure. Yeah. I did this like nourishing neural retraining workshop where, it's this idea of when we heal the brain, we heal the body. When we heal the nervous system, we heal the body. So really shifting things for ourselves with consistent dialogue within our brains, within our bodies. So one of my favorite things to do with folks is to create a proclamation of what they want for themselves in the present tense, even if it feels like this is so unattainable right now. And it could be anything from like, I am happy, I am healthy, I am healing. Mine for the longest time was I can go wherever I want, whenever I want, and eat and do whatever I want, because I was down to 20 safe foods I could eat without an EpiPen. I was scared to leave the house because I was so sensitive to chemicals and so many other things out in the world. And so that, when I remember I created my proclamation for myself, I was like, yeah, right, I'll ever get to this, which is a good sign, by the way. I want it to feel weird and uncomfortable, because we're now using, 95% of what we do is subconscious. So we're using the conscious side of our brain. So it's going to feel uncomfortable. It's like when you first start driving a car, right? You're very uncomfortable. You're like, what does this do? Especially think of like a manual car, which I'm trying to learn right now. And I'm like, how? But eventually it becomes subconscious. Even driving becomes subconscious. So I want you to see this as the same thing. It's going to feel uncomfortable until it becomes comfortable until it becomes your reality. So you're going to make a series of I am statements of who you want to be, but it's in the present tense, because our brain does not understand nuances of something that has happened and something that will happen, which is all about the dimension hopping. So when we go back in the past, I'm going all over the place. I'm hopping right now within this, but when we go into the past with our past selves, our younger selves, and we're with them and we're the person they wish they had. This is doing the inner child work now. That's extremely healing. Our brain assumes that you now actually did show up in the past to be with your younger self. And all of a sudden you're noticing a shift in your reality. Wow, I kind of had a different upbringing or childhood experience. It wasn't great, but something shifted, something changed, because you became present in that moment in time. So it's really amazing and fantastic to see how this all transforms. But one of my favorite activities, aside from the proclamation, and I tell anyone I work with, make sure it's the background of your phone, make it the wallpaper for your laptop, put it in front of your toilet. I want, anytime the negativity bias comes out to play, I want you to challenge it with these I am statements. And I want you to feel it in your body. I want you literally I want it to invoke all of your senses, because that's actually how memories are created. There's usually a feeling attached. Often you will not remember things if there was not a strong feeling attached to it, whether you tasted something, you smelled something, you felt something, right? You can all remember like certain sense from your childhood and memories attached to that, because that's the strongest way that we actually remember things from the past. So there's that. And another fun exercise I like to do with folks is if you envision or visualize something for yourself in the future. Like one woman in our group wants to write a book, the group at the Joshua Tree Music Festival. So we did this exercise where, imagine in 1 year from now, a really good friend or family member in your life calls you and you get to share the news of you doing something you've envisioned for yourself. So she went through this with one of her friends of like, the book was just published and I'm feeling so excited. And like, it was amazing to just witness her be in the present with what that will feel like in the future. And I could already see her like gears shifting of like, okay, I'm ready to take these next steps for myself, because she then shared that, whereas before she was feeling really scared and intimidated and like, that's a pipe dream. There's no way that could happen. Or so many people are already doing this. I love when I hear people say that. So many people already created, I hear this often with podcasts, or blogs or this or that. And my rebuttal is, well, how many pizza shops are there in your town? And how successful are all, they're all successful in different ways. I like this one better because of the crust, right? And they have gluten-free crust and it's a little bit thicker. That one is, not, they use cauliflower and it's not my ideal kind of crust, but they're still successful because someone else prefers that. So
yeah, totally. I think that like the activities you're describing are super powerful, because when you are imagining yourself doing something. And we call this in like, my training, we call this a motor plan. So there's invisible firing of motor units or neuromuscular connection throughout your body that actually prepares your body for the thing that you're imagining, right?
Yes.
So you can start to already feel literally the pathway into that experience as you're visualizing it. So this works like with you. Imagine doing a yoga pose before you do the yoga pose. You imagine yourself doing it in your head. Your brain is going to start firing those neurons to do it. And when you do it, you'll probably do it with more precision and with more strength than if you had just flung yourself into it watching somebody else do it, right? So these motor patterns already start to fire when you just imagine and get into that space of that thing being true.
100%. And, they've done studies on folks who just literally visualize themselves working out versus the control group that does not. And they noticed that they had stronger muscles, the ones who were simply visualizing themselves working out without working out. Hey guys, you can actually tone your muscles without going to the gym by simply visualizing yourself strength training. That's incredible. And it's back to the motor patterns. And also they've done like brain scans on Olympians, because when Olympians are training, they're not just physically training. When they're not physically training, their coaches are having them constantly visualize, like swimming those laps, gymnastics, doing all the flips, all the turns, etc. And they noticed in a brain scan and an MRI that the muscle, when they're visualizing, the right muscles are turning on for those exact activities. So when you're visualizing yourself writing that book, like the right neural pathways are being like set off basically to prepare you for that, to get you ready. And again, it's that from the beginning of this conversation, it's that idea of be, do, have. I'm writing this book. You are naturally going to start taking those micro steps to do it until you have it.
Absolutely. Yes. And I mean, super excited because I love the depth at which you're able to kind of go into this because, particularly that word proclamation, like that is such a fun, powerful word for like, what is going to be true? Like what is coming forward? Like I proclaim, this as a powerful statement. I mean, like I've used the term affirmation, I've used the term a mantra, right? When I do, like I've done somatic yoga workshops or mini retreats where I have people do that. Like they write a statement or two, the I am or my statement, where it's ownership of this thing, right? And then they do somatics. And then we do some somatic yoga, which opens up their body, which opens them up to different brain waves where they're more suggestible, right? They're less like, holding their pattern of resistance to things where they're softer and they feel relaxed and safe. And then I invite them to place that statement, and in your words, like their proclamation, in what area in their body needs to hear that. Where does that statement belong in your body?
Wow.
Stomach, your chest, right? Maybe in multiple places. Maybe it belongs on the surface of your skin, So then I invite them to plant their seed, and I call it a seed of being, that's going to grow into something. So I love like the synthesis here that I'm seeing in like the work that you do and that I do. And I know we've talked about other kinds of collaborations, but I'm just so excited for that because I hope that the people listening today, you're getting this idea of like something as complex as quantum theory, which is really ultimately what we're talking about here, is as simple as what little micro choice am I making that is aligning me with where I really feel drawn to going in my life. And sometimes when we're feeling directionless, that's where, finding a practitioner, someone like Christina or I, that can help you sense into that new patterning that's possible for you, right, is a game changer. It's absolutely game changing. Like that woman sitting there and she got into that experience of, the book is being published and I'm so excited for it versus where she was a moment ago on a completely different timeline where that wasn't going to happen.
That wasn't the reality. She thought it was literally, she called it a pipe dream. So that's two very, very different things. And if you're listening to this, I believe that anything is possible for you, that it can come to fruition, that you can manifest it. It is possible for you, whatever that is in your life. And Amy, I feel like we need to do like a neural retraining somatic workshop maybe online in the future.
So fun. I would
I know.
love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
it's happening. It's already happening. I'm visualizing it. I feel it in my chest. I feel it in my throat.
Yes, I love it. And yeah, and stay tuned for that, listeners. You'll
Yes.
see Christina's information in the show notes, also mine there if you're interested in learning more about how to release muscle tension, stress, and pain from your body. If you're dealing with chronic illness and you've been having a hard time finding someone who actually understands, that is totally Christina's wheelhouse. So get in touch with us. You can find us on Instagram. That information will also be in the show notes. And any last words here, Christina, before we close?
No, if you're listening to this, thank you so much for being here. And yeah, I believe in everything that you desire to be. You're amazing.
Yes, you are amazing, and you will find your people the more
Yeah.
that you align with what's true for you. It may
Yes.
sometimes feel like you're losing people or you're losing, friendships, but I want to say, like, as a testament, even just sitting here with Christina, stay on your authentic timeline, your authentic path, keep reorienting to that, and you will find people who are on your wavelength who can be the kind of friend or partner that you really needed, that you really need.
Oh my gosh, yes, that resonates so deeply. I've lost various people on the way, but that space allowed for people who were more in alignment and on my level and in the same frequency. And I am so grateful for it, even in moving through the grief of that loss of those relationships. So yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely. Okay, everybody, enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll let you know about upcoming stuff.
Yay! Thank you,
Yeah.
Amy.
Hey there, friend. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I would love to hear your thoughts. Follow me on Instagram at Amy Takaya and send me a DM about this episode. I'd like to thank you for being part of this somatic revolution. And if you'd like to support the podcast and help more people learn about somatics, consider leaving a review or a rating. And finally, if you'd like to have the experience of relief in your tight hips or back and learn to understand what your body is really saying to you, visit youcanfreeyoursoma.com. I can't wait to share with you what is truly possible. Bye for now.